It's just incredible to see how Bitcoin is the tool that is touching these people's lives. It's not fiat money. It's not some credit card. It's not, they're not signing up to American Express and suddenly their problems are going away. It's Bitcoin.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin block height is 818880, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and many other things as well. Today, that guest is Joe Nakamoto. Joe is a journalist and creator who travels the world giving people Bitcoin like a freaking psychopath and sharing stories of the realities of Bitcoin adoption on the ground, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You can find all Joe's links and accounts in the show notes or by going to bitcoinpodcast.net/words. I highly recommend you check out and share Joe's videos. Joe and I always have a good time when we hang out together at conferences, and today, even though we were separated by a wide ocean, we had some beers, had a great time, and ended up running for about 2 hours. We talked about his path before and leading to Bitcoin, the state of Bitcoin adoption in various countries, talking about Bitcoin at shitcoin conferences, KYC, AML, Lightning wallets, and a whole lot more. Before we get into the show, it's a good time to remind you that Christmas is right around the corner. And if you're looking for a great gift for friends, family, or a little present for yourself, head to bitbox.swiss/walker and use the promo code WALKER for 5% off the Bitcoin-only Bitbox O2 hardware wallet. The Bitbox O2 is perfect for seasoned psychopaths and new coiners alike. It's easy as hell to use, it's Bitcoin-only, naturally, and it's fully open source, so you can see the firmware in the Bitbox O2, check out the Bitbox app code, even x-rays of the hardware and other schematics. Just go to their GitHub and verify for yourself. You don't have to trust me. Or hell, build one for yourself if you feel like it. Or just go to bitbox.swiss/walker and use that promo code WALKER. As always, you can watch the Bitcoin Podcast on Rumble, YouTube, or X by searching at Walker America, or listen on fountain.fm or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for The Bitcoin Podcast. If you do listen to The Bitcoin Podcast on Fountain, consider giving this show a boost or creating a clip of something you found interesting. If you haven't checked out Fountain yet, I highly recommend it. You can send Bitcoin to your favorite podcasters and earn Bitcoin just for listening to this show. If you're a Bitcoiner and you're not using Fountain, I'm not really sure what the fuck you're doing. All right, without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with Joe Nakamoto. I'm gonna run the recording now because You never know what pure gold Joe Nakamoto may bring to the table before anything is officially live. Well, man, it's good to see you. I appreciate you hopping on here right after getting off a plane, probably some trains, automobiles.
Correct. All of the above. I was in Bulgaria like 6 hours ago, and that's where I was showing off my new Botev, my new favorite football team. Of course, I love Real Bedford, but
I was just going to say, have you informed Peter of your potentially shifting alliances, or how does that work? If you're outside the country and depending on what league they're in, you can love two teams equally. What's the rule there?
I think it's definitely a Brexit thing as well, because this is a European team, and obviously Bedford being in the UK, that can be my UK team, and then Botev is my Eastern European team, because presumably there's going to be a Western European team coming soon as well. So so I'm literally out of breath. I genuinely was running around the house trying to kind of connect stuff so that I could get online on time.
Man, how are you? Well, I'm fantastic. I'm doing well. I can. Is that a beer I see, by the way?
Yeah, this is poured by Sophie moments before. She said she might come in and say hi at some point, and if not, she passes on her congratulations and her salutations.
Well, salutations from me and from Carla as well to her, and of course to yourself. I was actually, it's only about, it's 1 p.m. here in the U.S., but I thought, if I know that son of a gun, Joe Nakamoto, he may have a beer, so I figured, let me just partake. I mean, after all, it's practically evening across the pond, so it would be remiss of me not to share a drink with you. So, cheers.
Cheers, mate. Lovely to see you. Cheers to you and the new family.
Yes.
Can I do that? Can I clink that?
Yeah, we can.
And I broke it. It's a cheap thing from Alibaba anyway, so it's probably going to break at some point.
Well, that's all right. Am I sounding good to you? Because you sound crystal clear to me.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I also lost my like mic stand on like travels here, so I've tried out an arm. Check this out. Have you used an arm before?
I'm using one. I'm using one right now. Can you? Because now that
Oh,
mine's
look at
not
that.
super adjustable. It's kind of it's a piece of shit that I got off Amazon for pretty cheap. Because I can't exactly justify large expenditures for this podcast endeavor yet. But I was like, I've got one of these little like these little guys that came with the
Oh,
mic,
that's smart.
and that works
Yeah.
well. Except you've got to lean in really close to it, and then it just
Yeah.
you look like you're kind of like, I've got a really big forehead, and then it just looks awkward. It's like my face is just full frame there. So yeah, trying the whole mic thing.
That's great.
Boom arm.
Yeah, and I've
Well,
got
wait.
a big old spot right here, which is front and center. Is this audio and video, or
This is audio and video, but yeah,
great.
don't. If it makes you feel any better, I've got a big old spot right here too. It's like we're twins here, so there's no judgment. We're both still hitting puberty after all. It's an interesting time in a young man's life.
It really is.
Who can blame us?
Exactly. So is this when you put in the comments like, jump to minute 4 to talk about Bitcoin content? Before that time, that they're sharing skincare routines and discussing European time zones.
Honestly, I have not. When I go through and do the editing for these things, I pretty much just like leave it as is. Like I put all of the guests' links, all of my like 6 guests or so that I've had so far. Quite a large arsenal. But I haven't done any of the whole like, okay, skip ahead to here when you get to the Bitcoin price prediction of 1 million thing, because I honestly find some of that to be just like a little cheap. I get that some people don't want to hear the banter of these things, but for me, it's like the banter is kind of what makes it. Like if I wanted to just get a couple of like a really quick hit, like I'm just going to read Twitter, like I'm listening to a podcast because I want just a little bit more flavor. And speaking of flavor, that flavor saver on your lip is getting outrageous, and I fully approve of it. It's quite impressive.
I need to actually trim it, and that's the weird part. Like Soph was saying, she started like a week ago, being like, "You need to get rid of this thing," and I was like, "There's only like a week left, and I'm actually getting a bit not uncomfortable, but it's just. Have you ever had to trim a mustache before? Have you ever got to that stage?
Thank you, Joe. That seems like it was a bit of a knock on my blonde mustache, but yes, I have gotten to that stage many times. I cycle through my facial hair, so I just go,
Nice.
from bearding it a little bit. But I've got like, the movie Joe Dirt. You ever seen that?
It rings a bell, but I don't
Maybe
think
it's an
I've seen it.
American thing. Anyway, he's got this white trash facial hair, and it only grows. If you're trying to imagine what it looks like mine. Like there's nothing right there, and it'll just never grow there. So I
Right.
just cycle through different versions of kind of a really white bread facial hair, and I think it works well. But if I may say, by the time the woman in your life is telling you, like, or asking you, I should say, are you going to cut that? That's when you know you're getting to almost mustache perfection. Like it's right
really?
after. Yeah, that's the sweet spot. Like you this is where you've got to hold out. You've got to stand your ground and be like, Walker told me if I let it go just a little bit longer, it'll be in the sweet spot. But the woman in your life telling you, maybe you need to cut that, that's the signal that it's
Okay.
almost perfection.
And also like the curling bit at the end, it all gets a bit weird and a bit, I had a lot of Bulgarians thinking I was Bulgarian, which is obviously a great sign.
That
And,
is, I mean-
now I'm back in Portugal. It's like, oh, you must be Portuguese. It's like, no, I just have facial hair.
Yeah.
Sorry to disappoint.
Oh man. So wait, on this trip, you were you just in Bulgaria, or were you pinning it on to some others?
Yeah, so I went to Sofia. I flew in there on Wednesday of last week, and actually flew back from there as well because Lisbon didn't have direct flights to anywhere else. Oh no, but I didn't even fly from Lisbon. I flew last minute from London because I needed to get a last minute visa to Ghana. I actually bumped into some of Peter McCormack's film crew in the Ghana Premium Application Centre, which was quite jokes.
Wow. Okay.
And because I reckon I'd met one of them, Kurt, in I think it was Bedford at some point. He's the guy who does these like amazing like swooping shots, and then I met his friend as well. And yeah, I messaged Pete like maybe an hour afterwards, being like, "Oh, I bumped into your pals," and he was like, "Yeah, the rumours were true." And I was like, so at some point I got doxed in this like Ghana visa application centre. But yes, we were having like a Bitcoin discussion at the back of this sort of like very quiet, austere sort of setting. being like, "Oh mate, have you seen that thing that just happened on Twitter, mate? It's like crazy, right? Isn't it?" And,
So you don't want to say Bitcoin too loud. You're like, shit, I don't want to have them give me some sort of a weird cavity search because they think all of the Bitcoins are, inside of me at this moment.
Exactly. Like, not again. Second time this year. And on top of that, I almost ran out of I had a real scare with getting the visa because I've almost filled up a passport, which sounds like a humble brag, but it's actually really frustrating because certain countries won't let you in if you don't have enough clean pages. So to get to the US again, which I'm currently struggling to get into, I need to get a new passport, and I'm going to get one of those ones that's like a Bible thickness. It's like Bitcoin standard thickness.
The passport. Extra thick ones. Yeah. It's such a ridiculous system. Like the idea that, you filled up too many of your open spots on these pieces of physical paper. And even though we literally use facial recognition at every border crossing, we still need to put a stamp in here because for some reason that makes sense. I truly don't understand it.
Yeah, it's and I mean, again, then we do this sort of border crossing in Africa or Latin America. They're actually going through and they're counting the days. And I realised this, and so obviously you can do visa runs and that sort of thing. And today I gave the wrong passport to the Bulgarian border patrol person because I've got 2 passports and I tried to keep one clean and one dirty. Yeah, stacked passports, right? And he was like, "There's no record of you being in this country." And I was like, "Oh crap, was it the other passport?" I was looking at him am I? Yeah, is that it? Am I off to the gulag? That's game over?
Oh my god.
Yeah, no, it was all okay. He laughed it off and was like, "Don't worry, this actually happens more than you'd think." But good thing is, got the Ghana visa, went to Bulgaria, which is where I was for the past few days, and I was there investigating this wonderful Mugs football team, which is Botev Plovdiv. But you know Eastern Europe a little bit, right? You've got family ties to Romania.
I do. Well, married into the family ties now, so I'm an honorary Romanian, is what I'm told, which is nice. It really, becoming an honorary Romanian just consists of spending enough time in the Maramureș area and being hazed by drinking a ton of palinka and tsuika, and
wow.
Yeah, it's a wonderful
Let's
part
talk
of the
about
world. That. Yeah, well, that's a whole rabbit hole, but it's a wonderful part of the world, and there's history all over the world, right? Every country has its story. But I find Eastern Europe, and maybe I'm a bit biased too, because my lovely wife is hailing from there, but I find their history and really recent history to be so fascinating because there are just so many lessons to be learned from it. And the attitudes people have in those countries about communism and different, let's call them more new age ideas, they're very skeptical. They doubt a lot. They're like, listen, we've seen this shit before. We've heard this line before. You're trying to sell me something, and you're probably trying to sell me totalitarianism. I want no part of it. So I find it interesting too, because I'm not sure about Bulgaria, but at least in Romania, it's still a heavily cash-based economy, and very little use of credit. Credit cards a lot of people have them, but I think it's something it's in the upper 90% of Romanians that primarily transact with either cash or debit cards. It's just they just really don't trust banks and credit card companies too much. I mean, obviously they trust the banks enough to, use a debit card, but there's a lot of just hesitation about that. I think because they've seen what happens when state controls come in and say, okay, your money isn't yours, or you're not allowed to use foreign currency because that's, anti-party behavior. And it's fascinating to me. I love visiting that part of the world, though. It's
No, definitely echoes of that sort of culture in Bulgaria. And I mean, I lived in Serbia for 4 months, 5 or 6 years ago, and did a project there. And again, it was all cash-based, total distrust or mistrust rather of government, and that really played out during the pandemic because when the rules change every 2 weeks or whenever, just the banker was okay, now it's 2 meters, now it's 3 meters, now it's a mask, now it's this and that and the other. And I think a lot of the Eastern Europeans were like, this is all bollocks. We've been here before. We know exactly what the governments say. Whatever the governments say, you take it, you chuck it in the bin, and you do the other thing.
Yeah,
it's kind of wonderful.
It's like people, in America, there's all over the world, there's a big, still a clash between the pro-vax and the anti-vax, and anyone who is even mildly skeptical of any vaccine or of the schedule for applying those vaccines is automatically this anti-science, anti-vaxxer. But it's like, Americans, please go to Eastern Europe for like 2 minutes and ask somebody about vaccines, and they will tell you about how they used to be forced to take that, whatever the government said, with absolutely zero recourse during communism. And so, yeah, they are a little bit hesitant now to trust, a rapidly thrown into the market shot from a company or a government. It's interesting. I think that doubt serves people well in general. Like my extremely Romanian father-in-law, he always says, Walker, dubito ergo cogito, cogito ergo sum. He's got like this very deep, nice Romanian voice, and it's like, I doubt, therefore I think,
like
I think, therefore I am.
Oh, that was Latin?
It was. And it's genuinely such a good sentiment to have. It's like, I think people are very doubtful of things that they don't agree with these days, which is good. But it's a good reminder to also be doubtful about messages you do agree with, because oftentimes that's where our blind spot is. It's this idea that like, oh, I like what I'm hearing, so I'm not going to apply the same critical thinking to it that I do to a message from somebody that I don't agree with. And so it's a constant reminder to challenge oneself.
Yeah.
But, so with that, so we can, maybe, Joe, just for you, I'll put in a thing that says, oh, if you want to get by Walker and Joe's banter about Eastern Europe and coffee mugs, skip to this, but I probably won't. I'll probably make them sit through all of it. But
Good.
I'm still figuring this out, Joe. I've got to say, I'm figuring out what's the best way to do this whole podcast thing. And do I always intro every guest, or do I do like the cool guy thing where you're just talking and it's assumed that you know who the guest is? And so I'm just kind of go for a little bit of both. So What I'll do right now is I'll go, greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. And today's episode is Bitcoin Talk. I'm joined today by a guy who goes around the world talking about Bitcoin. He frankly won't shut up about it sometimes. His name is Joe Nakamoto. He is a journalist, a creator, a speaker, a moderator. He's also hosting conferences all the time. Him and I are often mistaken for the same person backstage. This is happening far too frequently now. But you'd think that the accent would give it away. Apparently it doesn't. But Joe also has a much, much darker side. And it's something he tries to hide a little bit. And that's that he is an incredibly toxic maximalist. He's also
like a shitcoiner.
No, I wasn't.
Incredible shitcoiner.
You should see this guy's shitcoin. No, but Joe, you're a toxic maximalist, and you've also been called, a bit of a virtue signaler, I think. And I, for one, as an American, know that you are a closet imperialist who is intent on, bringing.
No, it's not closet.
Yeah. Okay. Well, oh boy, here we go again. But Joe, with that intro, welcome to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. It is great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Walker. What a tremendous introduction. How many times did we rib me? Like 6? That is excellent.
There were compliments as well. It wasn't just ripping.
Backhanded, which is the best way to deliver a compliment, of course. But yeah.
I'm pretty sure you British folk take the imperialist comment as a compliment, actually. It's like, the whole world, it was ours. Yeah, that was us.
The sun never sets on the British Empire.
It sure does not.
I can't believe I just said that on a podcast.
Well,
I'm gonna get cancelled.
I'm gonna make that into a song. We're gonna put a nice beat behind it, and it's just gonna be you saying the sun never sets in the British Empire. Beautiful. But
we should change it to like Bitcoin, or the sun never sets on the blockchain.
No, you said what you said. There's no going back now. No take backs. But it's good to have you here, Joe, because you and we have had some good times together at various conferences. It's one of those things where we, got to finally meet in person. When was the first time we met in person? Was it Lugano last year, or was it before that?
Yeah, no. I have vivid memories of certain places, but I have an awful memory for this kind of thing. So I think I'm going to say Lugano as well, because immediately I went to El Salvador, but it was Lugano, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I was in El Salvador too. It's nice of you to forget that already, but that's fine.
No, that was where I thought we hung out and jammed, but no, it was Lugano.
There was some jamming involved. There was a lot of Paco involved as well. He was all over the place, as usual, making sure everyone had a great time. But you have been around the world. I think you probably travel as much or more than any other Bitcoiner I know in terms of Bitcoin-related travel. And I'd love to. I know I gave basically a perfect intro. There's probably not much to add to your backstory. However, I would love to hear kind of who the fuck is Joe Nakamoto. How did he get here today to be this guy who is a traveling journalist and creator and just goes around the world like a freaking psychopath, giving people Bitcoin and trying to teach them about Bitcoin in this incredibly toxic way with this smile on your face and that mustache? How did you get to that point? What was that journey like?
Okay. Thank you, by the way, again, for these lovely words. And today I did do some giving out Bitcoin to people in the street in Bulgaria, dressed as a giant Bitcoin bee. And it does hark back to a little bit what we were saying about, the Eastern European culture, that there is that distrust of other people. And so it was quite hard to, engage with people. So I did the whole clipboard thing, which always helps. If you hold a clipboard, for some reason, people just trust you a bit more. And then I held a magic wand, which was actually bubbles. So I was doing like Bitcoin bubbles. So that'll be a video.
So toxic of you.
Yeah, that'll be out sometime soon. But why am I here? Well, is it that Bill Gates quote? I'm going to get this wrong about when you're doing your life and it feels like completely like all over the shop, and then you look back at it and you're like, oh, actually, I'm kind of joining the dots now, and it kind of does make a lot more sense now I'm looking back. And I had this sort of reflection. I think it was late last week. I was like, how on earth have I ended up here? Like, why am I walking around a football stadium in Eastern Europe dressed as a Bitcoin, waving a flag, trying to get into the ultra section of the stadium? And it was one of like the Eastern European ultras. It is terrifying. These people are like tops off, chanting, shouting. They've got flares, like sometimes they have fireworks. And I was there and like dressed as a Bitcoin, like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, but still, it was one of those moments you just think, oh, okay, yeah, there's been a lot of things that have led up to this point, and maybe I should share those with you now. So, I mean, I'm professionally trained as a journalist via Oxford Business Group, which belongs to Bloomberg. I was with those guys for 3 years, up until and also during the pandemic. And with this company, I travelled sort of all over the world, and I was dropped off in random places, and I had to create like reports or economic sort of research that people could then use to make investments from. While that was all like sort of highbrow stuff, what I was actually learning was how to meet people, network, connect with people, and do sort of on the ground reporting and research. Like if you're dropped into the Ivory Coast tomorrow, it seems quite daunting, but I'm like, that sounds absolutely amazing. Like, can I please do that? Because the situations you find yourself in, the connections you make, and the friends you make, and the friendships that you eventually nurture are like some of the most amazing ones that I've got, because you're in this sort of exciting environment together. So yeah, I did that for a few years. Or should I go back a bit more? Should I go back to university?
You can go back as far as you want. This is open format, man. There are no rules.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I don't know how deep I should go. Okay. So I'm one of 3 siblings, right? My brother, super duper smart, like Cambridge, like very, very intelligent. He's now got a job in somewhere that I literally cannot say publicly, which is just brilliant.
Is it MI6?
But no, it's worse.
Yeah. So it's the CIA then?
Can Brits even work for the CIA? Can we like imperialist that?
Anyone can work for the CIA. That's kind of their whole shtick.
Oh, okay. I must work for the CIA because that was my amazing double bluff there.
Yeah. And if the CIA is listening, Joe totally played it cool.
Yeah. Yeah, guilty. Anyway, so the reason why I'm not a spook is because, I mean, a lot of information about me is very public. But yeah, grew up in a rather busy, large household, went to a decent enough university, did what was expected of me, ended up in London. I always wanted to learn a few languages because I find that if you can speak to someone in their like native tongue, then you have a sort of better connection with them, and it just opens doors and it's just a lot more fun. And then did the grad route, which is kind of what's expected of you in the UK. You go to London, you get a nice job in the city or a nice enough job, and you do that until you sort of rise up the corporate ladder. And yeah, I mean, we're going to call this fiat stuff, aren't we? And
I was there as well.
And yeah, after a couple of years in London, I was like, I'm in debt still. I thought I was earning enough to be able to like experience life and do the stuff that I wanted to do, but I could never have, of course, buy buy a flat, and I saw a job posting that said, travel 11 months of the year, have no fixed place of address, and earn while you work, or something, or words to that effect. And I was like, this sounds like the most wonderful scam. Where can I sign up? And I flew to Madrid the following week for an interview, and the interview was like The Apprentice, or you call it the Donald Trump thing. What do you call it?
Yeah, the Apprentice, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I was wondering if it was like Shark Tank that's become like Dragon's Den, or like, they sometimes rebrand them. Or like, like pavements become sidewalks, like that rubbish rebranding.
Oh, what a terrible rebrand.
Sorry, I won't go there. And I did this apprentice-style job interview where every 3 hours someone was brought into the CEO and the COO's office, and they were essentially told to go home. And it was 20 young, bright, also really attractive.
Did you just call yourself really attractive, just for the record?
Everyone but me was very attractive. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. I was just wondering. I'm actually compiling a whole dossier on you, so this is part of it.
Great. Add to the one that's already in the CIA and MI6 and everywhere else. And I was actually referring to the women there. The women were like very attractive, and I was kind of like, what is going on with this thing? And on the final round interview, which on the second day at like 8 o'clock in the evening, and we've been going since 8 o'clock that morning, we're all like exhausted, nerves absolutely shattered. And it was the classic sort of last interview question. It was me and this girl called Magdalena, and the last question was, okay, like, we think you're probably both good enough to do the job that's expected of you. Now sell me your colleague, and based on how well you do, we might accept you. And so that was like the last thing it was a great play by them, but it was a test and a taster of what we would experience on that job. And I eventually ended up getting the job. I sold Magdalena so well that she actually got the job as well, so they offered it to both of us. And then
Nice.
The following week I flew to Serbia. I'd actually sort of recently broken up with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and so I was like really looking for a change. But I also just liked the idea of seeking out something more. And then, moved to Serbia for 3 months, and then to Portugal for the first time for 4 months, then to Poland for 2 months. Then I literally lose track of where it was. But in total, it was Tunisia, the Ivory Coast, Morocco, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, and I mentioned the other ones, and a few other countries. And you'd be living in these places 3 to 6 months at a time, doing these sort of advertorial projects. But you're basically doing a journalism story, and then at the end of it, this very hot sales girl would pitch these people for an advert to complement whatever they said in the interview. Now, this job thing is called, it's actually like a well-known international scam that's been going for about 50 years, and it's called the industry, like in quotation marks. And it's like a fascinating sort of job thing. And there's a couple of French guys that have written books about it. And these are the sort of people that would like fly into the Congo, pitch like the president there, get $100,000 advert, never publish the interview, and walk away with the money. And there are lots of companies like this that did this all over the world, and they'd primarily target like the developing world. So I stayed with these guys for a total of 10 months, and I was like really interested in the journalism thing, but was completely disgusted by the ethics of like this sort of industry thing. It was also fascinating, like just to learn that this kind of thing still goes on in the present day.
Is this company like still operating?
Yeah.
Going strong?
Yeah. And they'll tell you that it's not sponsored journalism, it's not advertorial, and that the reason that they only hire like hot, young, often Eastern European girls is because they're the best, they've got the best commercial value or whatever. But in reality, it's a very like twisted sort of thing. But from that job, there was a reputable company called Oxford Business Group that did very similar work to what this other company did, but with actual decent research and decent analytics. And that's when I sort of properly became a journalist. As prior to that, I was essentially going into a meeting room, and for those 45 minutes that I got to talk with a CEO or the Minister of Health or the Minister of Economy or whatever it was in like a sort of small developing country, my idea was to get some information about him that the sales girl could use in the interview. For example, if I'm talking to you as a CEO of your company does like radios and transmitters and that sort of stuff in Romania. So I'd be like, okay, so what are your sales this year? Like, what's the market doing? And you'd be like, hopefully you'd be honest with me. And all the while I'm thinking, okay, his sales are up 25% this year. That means she's got a green light to sell. And then I'd talk about like massaging your ego a bit. I'd ask about that lovely artwork behind you. I'd ask like how many people you've added to your team this year. And I'd say that, oh, by the way, we've got photos with the Minister of Radios or the Minister of Technology or whatever in Romania. And he would love to hear more from you. And you'd like pretend set up a fake meeting with them. And I'd be like massaging your ego rather throughout this interview discussion. And at the end of it, you're on cloud nine. I've got enough research, and the sales girl comes in and says, wow, that was incredible, Walker. Wow, I just love the way you said this, that, and the other. And oh my God, your sales are up so well. And I'm just thinking, I just wanted to offer you this really exclusive opportunity that we only offer to the best clients. It's it's an advert to complement your comments, of course. And we could put it right here next to the Minister of Health in the report we're putting together. And that'll be 50,000 euros, sign here. And you walk out of there. And sometimes you publish a report, sometimes you don't, and then you disappear on a plane a couple of months later. And this was still happening, and still happens today in 2023. They will say it otherwise, and I'll probably get into trouble for saying this, but I've said it on other podcasts as well, and they really do not care.
That is what it sounds like. It sounds like a great topic for a somewhat soft true crime documentary, because it's like there's got to be something illegal going on there. But wow, that's fascinating. So. Then you were at this Oxford Business Group, you said, yeah? Mm-hmm. How long were you there? And then when did that transition into kind of the Bitcoin side of reporting?
So while the sort of interesting thing for me here, relevant to my Bitcoin story, is that because I'd seen so many different countries, so many different ways in which regimes work, and so many different ways in which fiat money ultimately fails, I was also slowly being sort of orange pilled, because I mean you've probably seen this through your own network of Bitcoiners. Like a lot of them are pretty well traveled, and it's because a lot of the time they've seen that, okay, I'm mega bloody privileged on the global scale. Like I've got a British passport, I'm white, I'm male, I'm quite tall, and like all these like things that are just mega privileges. And I come with the British pound, which is obviously a shitcoin, but it's a stable shitcoin relative to other currencies. But then when you like see how bad the Tunisian dinar is, or you see the fact that a lot of the franc currencies, the CFA currencies, are pegged to the euro, but then things are more expensive there, like month over month, than they are in Europe. It sort of opens your mind a bit to, okay, what is this actual money thing that I'm using all over the world, but certain people play with better rules than others? And I was like, this is completely unfair. There's got to be some truth to this. And that was sort of my touch points before I properly got orange pilled, let's say. But because I was trading Bitcoin in Trinidad and Tobago in 2019. It was like a very chill project. It was in the Caribbean. And I would in the evenings, I would sit on my balcony and go on Coinbase, not even Coinbase Pro.
Oh, wow.
And I would be like, yeah, and I was doing spot buys and sells, thinking I was a genius. And obviously, the price back then was 3K, 4K, something like that. Obviously, I should have just bought a load of Bitcoin. But no, genius me was thinking, yeah, this is how you make money.
Yeah,
just kind of out of boredom.
Well, right. You're like, oh man, I'm definitely seeing the moves before they're happening. I've got this figured out. Yeah.
Yeah. And all the while you realise that, yeah, the fee you're paying as well on the likes of a Coinbase and the spread that you're getting on it wasn't great. And I was doing spot stuff. But that was me sort of being aware that Bitcoin was a thing. And I don't know if you remember that run up in 2019. It was quite considerable. And I got it was a taste of what a bull run is like. So when I lost my job with Oxford Business Group in right at the start of the pandemic, so I took the last flight out of Tunisia. I would have literally been locked in Tunisia. And the worst part was I just secured a flat. I just bought 2 crates of beer, a surfboard, a guitar, and because I thought, right, well, I've got my flat. This pandemic thing will be blown over in a couple of weeks. So I'll just sit here for 2 weeks, play the guitar, do illegal surf trips in the afternoon, because on the north coast of Africa, there's actually some quite good surf, and it'll all be fine. And then suddenly just things ramped up. Europe closed all its borders. So to get back to the UK, because that was when I was like, oh, my dad's going to die. All that stupid stuff that goes through your head at the start of the pandemic. And so I flew back via Istanbul. And on the plane home, I downloaded, it was actually what Bitcoin did, the beginner series, and I actually started to take it more and more seriously. And finally, because I'd lost my job, I had the time to take it seriously. But because I'd moved back in with my parents at that point, which is obviously an error looking back, because obviously it doesn't affect people that badly at all. It's just like another illness. I got a job in a factory, and so I was I was earning minimum wage, which at the time was £8, but now it's like £11 in the UK. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I was allowed to wear headphones, and so this was when I got properly like down the rabbit hole. Oh my God, this Bitcoin thing is a lot bigger than we think, and got the Internet of Money 1 and 2. And I think, as with a lot of Bitcoiners, it was the Andreas stuff that really hit it home for me. Because I heard him on the Introduction to Bitcoin podcast by Peter, and was like, this Andreas guy, he just talks with such clarity. He just really seems to get it in a way that I will never be able to get it. But I want to try to attain that level of understanding of this digital phenomenon. And yeah, so that was when I was like, okay, I need to stop working in this fiat-based model and work in a Bitcoin-based model. But first, I'm going to try to write about Bitcoin for the likes of Oxford Business Group. And so I did. And I wrote about remittances into sub-Saharan Africa. We did a project on Togo, and I touched a little bit on like Bitcoin and fiat monies. And what else did I do? A lot of them were like really poorly researched, and they had to be written in a certain way. Because if you're talking about Bitcoin, you'd have to say, but by the way, Bitcoin uses loads of energy, so you should look at this other green cryptocurrency called Chia or something. And ultimately, all cryptocurrencies are very volatile, most are scammy, and do not invest, any money at all. Not even like what you can't afford to lose, but just literally do not invest. And so, yeah, eventually, obviously, grew quite tired of that, and was like, I want to do something meaningful in this space. I feel like this is the direction I want my career and basically my life to go in. And ended up working at this company called DAP Radar. So, have you ever heard of them?
I don't think so, actually.
That's a good thing. Great.
Okay.
Because they're a massive shitcoin publication. It's decentralized application radar.
No, I know what DAP means. I just had
okay. Sorry, yeah, that was mega patronizing.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll let it slide just because you're British. It's in your blood. We do. I get it. I know. But okay, so
get out of bed and I patronize.
All is forgiven here on this Another Fucking Bitcoin podcast. It is again open Fantastic. Season. Great. So DAP Radar. How long were you there before you were like, it must have been not jiving with what you were also learning at that time, where you're like, hold on a sec, this doesn't feel right. I know that a lot of this is just, vaporware, and you wanted to, I assume, go in a different direction than that.
I mean, I thought during the job interview that I would be able to eventually end up talking about Bitcoin, writing about Bitcoin, making content about Bitcoin. And I think that because I'd had a year of like effectively working a minimum wage job and then working like quite a crap job at a sort of local company in Yorkshire, like my confidence and self-esteem was quite low. And so I pitched for a job that was perhaps underneath my skills, and got there and was like, okay, I'm doing like sponsored content for essentially like crypto token projects. So that was soul destroying in itself, but also I was like, the quality of what people are putting out here, like the research, the due diligence, all this sort of stuff, which I'd been sort of trained with, I was like, this is absolutely crap, like content that we're putting out here. So that was one sort of side of it. And the other side was that, there was actually a moment when we were talking on Slack to one of my colleagues, and he was like, oh, have you finished that piece about X metaverse thing yet? And I was like, no, it should be done by, tomorrow morning. He was like, oh, okay. I thought it would have rugged by now.
Oh my God.
And I was like, okay, like fuck this. Like I am out. And I need to just write about Bitcoin. I want to put my name to Bitcoin, and I just don't want to have anything to do with this insipid crypto industry. It's just rank, and it just attracts bad actors. And even the people that come in with like really good intentions, I think a lot of them get quite twisted by the nature of that beast. So that's when I was like, okay, so this. I think that, and also I boosted my confidence by realizing that there was a lot of crap, sort of. Like poorly skilled people, let's say, around me. I don't want to sound like arrogant, but honestly, I was a journalist, and I was coming into a role that was like, and I was as a senior editor at Oxford Business Group, and then I entered as a sort of junior role at a sort of startup crypto company that was also launching its own token. So they were going to eventually pay me in their token, and that token launched, and it just tanked, and I actually haven't kept up with it. I mean, there were some really nice people there, but ultimately it was just not the world that I want to build towards. And so, yeah, I looked at, okay, what is the sort of smorgasbord of Bitcoin and crypto-related journalist jobs out there? Thought Cointelegraph had a good reach and good graphics, sent off an application, had a couple of calls, and then started there. And in the application, I was pretty explicit about the fact that like I wanted to make Bitcoin my beat. And yeah, to this day, I've written like 4 pieces of work about genuine crypto projects, and that was in like the first month of me working there. And ever since, I've only written about Bitcoin. I've got a big spreadsheet that tracks what is in the headline and what is in the body of the article, and it's like a weighting of like 75% to 25% Bitcoin versus crypto. But when I write about crypto or make content about crypto, I always try to do it with Bitcoin in mind, because I'm obviously a mega biased journalist. But
right.
I don't care, because fiat journalists are also mega biased. And that is something, I mean, funny little sidebar. I was at a dinner last week in Lisbon with the editor-in-chief of the Financial Times The Banker newspaper. And I tried to give her some Bitcoin. And I was like, I'd had a few drinks, she'd had a few drinks, we were chatting around and stuff, and her eyes were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as I was like, no, I'll just send you some Bitcoin. You can send it right back. You don't have to hold it for any more than 1 second. She's like, I literally cannot hold Bitcoin. And you know, it is against, like, it's a conflict of interest. I was like, oh, come on. It's just a lightning wallet. Let me show you with my ring. I'll just send you some sats. You can send it back. And eventually she just got up from the table and just left. And I was
oh
like,
my God.
Yeah.
Which is such a
wild.
ridiculous, like that's what an absurd rule. Like, does she not own any sort of stocks, like no securities event? Like, does she own literally nothing but the pound, or like?
No, that's actually true. Yeah, because I was like, wait, so you literally cannot hold anything? She was like, no, I choose not to hold anything. And I was like, okay, well, you don't have to hold it. Can I just show you how Bitcoin works? Because you're here at a crypto event, and so you know you're going to have to be expected to understand how crypto works at some point. Here's how this layer 2 on Bitcoin works. And I tried to do it from like an educational, like softer angle. And in the end, I just ended up sort of taking the mick and being like, this is just hilarious. Like, can I pass you this handkerchief? Like, are you going all in on the handkerchief? Like,
right.
Are you all in on the chair?
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that clip, by the way, of Sailor.
So good.
But I think that's such an interesting thing. Like, on the one hand, I appreciate this woman's desire to want to stay extremely impartial. Like that's honestly a rare trait, or a trait that is getting more rare these days. But on the other hand, it's like if you're not even going to use something, to try and use it, or to use any of the associated technology, like to even just hold it for a second, like, here, you just hold my phone, let me send, I don't know. It seems difficult for anyone to get a true, deep understanding of it. I mean, it's like if you're reading about fishing all the time, and you've read lots and lots of books about fishing, and you've watched some documentaries about fishing, and you've read all the new research reports about fishing, and you're like, okay, yep, like I know all about fishing. It's like, yeah, but you still don't know how to fish, and you've never been on the river, you've never been in the lake, you've never been in the ocean. You really have this completely kind of academic and sterile point of view of something without ever seeing, okay, how does this actually work for me? And that's, perhaps you could argue that you can get a pretty good idea of, let's say, the monetary theory side of it. You could get a fairly good idea of that. I mean, if you study a lot of Austrian economics, surely you should be able to have a decent handle on that. But at least for me, I found, the first time I took Bitcoin off an exchange and put it into self-custody, it was like, oh, wow, this is a really amazing learning opportunity for me. And like something new just clicks, where it's like, now, no, this is just me. Like, it's all on me.
I can't wait to do that personally.
For the first time.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's kind of fascinating. And you mentioned, so you were at a crypto conference, and I'd love to touch on that a little, because I know you have been very vocally at a number of different, crypto shitcoin conferences this year. I personally think it's a wonderful thing. It gives an opportunity, like, you are in an audience of people that already is in on, quote, crypto, and for some reason got siloed onto the shitcoiny side without discovering Bitcoin enough along the way. But I know that's something, or at all, which is mind blowing. Can you talk about some of those experiences? I watched a couple of the videos from it, and some of the people who were like, "Yeah, Bitcoin, yeah, I've heard of it, but that's about it," and which just blows my mind. Like there are that many people in the crypto space that really don't even have the faintest idea about Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's kind of wild, right? And I think it's even more than that. I think that a lot of people in the crypto space don't even know that like they're using crypto. Like if you enter through some NFT thing, like is that really crypto? If you're just like an NFT artist, are you even touching crypto in a serious way? I'm not sure why. Like you've like a lot of Bitcoiners have at some point tried to question and work out what money is, and a lot of the crypto people, and crypto is so all-encompassing now, right? You've got everything from some metaverse designer to an NFT artist shill to someone that's trying to build some Web3 decentralized product. Oh my God, how many trigger words have I said in the past 10 seconds? Have I just lost you subscribers?
No, that's okay. Bring them on. All the trigger words. I always want something to be a little bit triggering. Like,
okay,
it's a good thing. Keep up the trigger words. Like throw in blockchain innovation, and I don't even know. You've already gone through a lot of them, but yeah. Okay. So they come in from. But that's the thing, that their entry point is the buzzwords. Like it's the buzzword side of things, where it's something they put in their Twitter bio that they're into blockchain, Web3, NFT, decentralized, whatever. Without a lot of times, like especially with like the word decentralized, it's a really incorrect word for a lot of these folks to be using, because most of these projects are in fact massively centralized, which is always just funny. But continue, please.
Yeah, no, just on that note of decentralized, there was one talk at the NEAR conference. You might have seen the video from there where I was like the toxic Maxi going around the crypto conference. I've got a 5.5 minute video of that I've just finished editing, where I go into a bit more like depth with some of the discussions. But there was a panel on screen, and I was walking past the main stage, and one of the slides, on the screen said, just how decentralized is NEAR? Like, how can we make NEAR like more decentralized? It was like words to that effect. And I was like, these jokes just write themselves. Like, they're like aware it's not decentralized. They're like, we know we're centralized. We're trying to become decentralized. But like, no system in the world has ever become more like decentralized from a point of being centralized. Like power always centralizes before it then breaks down again. And that's why like the innovation or the invention of Bitcoin is so important, because it was decentralized like from the outset, and it's only becoming more and more decentralized. And yeah, it was bizarre seeing that. And I took a picture actually, and hang on, I'll scroll through my photos and find it while I tell you about how strange it is to be at these crypto conferences. But I mean, a lot of my colleagues at Cointelegraph, who I like love dearly, a lot of them are really into crypto projects and NFT stuff, and they know that I'm this Bitcoin maxi like orange pillar, but they're happy doing their thing. I think that for a lot of people, they will come around to Bitcoin when they finally like need it. And if you are, I don't know, let's say you're a doctor in New York and you're on a 250k salary, then at what point are they going to really need Bitcoin? Not necessarily as like a because they've got enough money, right? They've got a decent enough living. They might be able to afford a house at some point. So they're not necessarily blinded by their financial privilege, but they're so financially privileged that they don't need Bitcoin as a savings tool or as a censorship-resistant technology, and they're not worried about a bank run or whatever it may be, because they've probably got some connection somewhere, which means they're always going to be okay.
Especially in New York,
Yeah, right. Unless we're talking about like what a lot of Bitcoiners talk about, which is like total economic collapse, which I really don't want, and that's not a world that I want to work towards and then rebuild from. I know that could be, the beginnings of some perfect utopia, but the cost of that and the effect of it all, just no thanks. I think I'd rather it just slowly builds up.
No, I think I'm with you there. Like I do not want to see total economic collapse. Like I think that's a very bad scenario, because a lot of just truly innocent people get really hurt. And like when there are economic collapses, like mortality rate goes up. Like people literally die because either they, like on the one end of the extreme, cannot feed their families and cannot get a job, or they fall into a deep depression and they commit suicide or something terrible. Like these sorts of collapses genuinely hurt normal people. And a lot of times the people who are okay before them at the very top are still okay after them. Like it's not this huge cleansing that people want it to be all the time. What I will say though is that to your point about, just financial privilege and taking some time to get Bitcoin. One article I love is Gladstein's Check Your Financial Privilege. Like it's a great one if you want to, reply guy to somebody who is clearly just, doesn't understand Bitcoin, but is coming from a place of like, they have more money than they know what to do with and have no need to understand it. Like it's a really great one because nobody likes being told that they're privileged and to check it. It's, I think it's very triggering. But it's a nice thing, I think, for Bitcoin's adoption when we talk about a bottom-up adoption, that the people who are most comfortably financially, not all of them, because there are a lot of very wealthy, successful people who do get Bitcoin very early and say, oh, wow, this is the only way I'm going to be able to protect the substantial wealth I've accumulated, that I've worked hard for, that I've built businesses to accumulate. But for a lot of people who are on the upper side of the, let's say, wealth spectrum, they are not going to get it right away, but that's kind of a good thing because it does give people who have maybe not had either the best financial resources or the best, maybe they've just had some bad luck. Maybe they're hardworking, but you know what? Working hard and at a blue collar job doesn't do what it used to. And it gives those people a chance to at least try and even the playing field a little bit. Like I think that's a beautiful thing about Bitcoin, and it gives people in the developing world a chance to leapfrog ahead of where the so-called developed world is now, because they're able, and this is why these circular economies popping up around the world are so wonderful, because that is helping people, to help themselves where the state has not, where, various relief orgs have not. And it's giving them a chance to genuinely, again, take a hold of this knowledge, and if they should choose to, get a little bit of a head start on the rest of the world. Like it's an amazing thing to look at, any of these small communities. I know you've visited quite a lot of them, these, circular economies, and probably, if I had to guess, have some more scheduled for these next few months, maybe in That's some warmer correct. Climates, if I had to guess. But let's switch gears then a little bit to that, because what, you over this past year, you were in Peru, you were in Argentina, Cuba, a number of places where there is Bitcoin adoption to various degrees. But maybe this is a good opportunity to just kind of talk about some of the realities of adoption on the ground, because when you're in these countries, like you really go out of your way to talk to people, like on the street, random people. It's kind of part of the whole Joe Nakamoto shtick, and I love it. And the video, it makes for some wonderful video content too. But what's been your experience with people on the ground in some of these countries where, like, let's say, take a place like Cuba, where I know that was a pretty intense experience. Were there things that were kind of really surprising in a good way, and then really surprising in a not so good way in terms of the state of Bitcoin adoption? Because a lot of Bitcoiners, especially in the again so-called developed world, like to just look around, Bitcoin fixes this, and Bitcoin does fix a lot of things, but it doesn't fix everything, and it doesn't fix everything right away. So what's been your experience with kind of the realities of Bitcoin adoption on the ground in these countries? What's jumped out at you? What's really stuck with you?
Yeah, great question, and lovely lead up as well. That was great, man. You're a natural.
Now I'm just always going to think you're fluffing my ego as a part of some advertising scheme. I've got my eye on you.
I've got some wonderful sales girl about to enter the room here and pitch you.
Yeah, well, but that aside, I think it's they've got me all hot and bothered over here.
No. Let me show you a photo to help you catch your breath. This is beautiful. The panel that I saw. So it says, "Is NEAR a decentralized protocol?"
Dear Lord.
That joke writes itself. That was on the main stage. The guy is talking it through. Like, when do we reach an inflection? When NEAR reaches an inflection point, what may follow? So yeah, this is what goes on at crypto conferences.
They need you there, Joe, and they need honestly like more Bitcoiners there. I think it's a good thing for Bitcoiners to go to these conferences and to be just as toxic as is needed, because sometimes a little bit of that toxicity is sometimes it goes a long way.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you mentioned Argentina there. I didn't go to Argentina this year, but I was invited to go to the La BitConf, which is like the biggest blockchain conference in Latin America. And I couldn't end up, like, it was just really expensive to get there, basically. And so I didn't go. But again, that's a Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain, whatever you want to call it, conference. But again, you want to have like the likes of Giacomo Zucco, or like, let's get Safe on stage at some like horrible crypto conference. Wouldn't that be amazing? Like, as long as he's not like too toxic, which obviously we can't guarantee, but wouldn't that be amazing if he was as well?
I would pay to see that show any day.
Yeah. But that would hopefully, you'd hope that they would ask the right questions that would get people's minds ticking in the audience, and they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe it is more than just like some speculative token stuff. Maybe there is like some real meaningful change we can do with this coin, which I guess segues onto your question there. And yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to do on the ground Bitcoin adoption stuff and genuinely understand if a lot of what we say online, like the Bitcoin fixes this, the fact that Bitcoin will affect the global south more than the developed countries around the world. I wanted to see and understand with my own eyes whether or not that was true. And also, it was after a conversation I had with Udi Wertheimer. I bet you weren't expecting to hear that on this podcast.
Many trigger words.
Yeah, I know, right? So we had like a back and forth, like maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and I was talking about how important Bitcoin is in poorer countries. And this is when I was in Senegal, and I was writing to him from Senegal, being like, "You're full of shit, mate. There's people using Bitcoin here. There's a guy starting a circular economy here." And he was like, "No, it's not." And I was like, "I wrote about it on Cointelegraph." And he's like, no one reads that crap." I was like, "Okay, whatever. Like, that's fine." I mean, not a lot of people do read it. That's absolutely fine. But I was like, I need to make these stories more shareable, more visual, I guess, and more relatable to people. And so, because when I first joined Cointelegraph in it's like two and a bit years ago now, I spent January, February, and March of 2021 in Senegal. And I was just hanging out surfing, but also tracking the Bitcoin adoption story there. As a year on from that moment, they hosted one of the first sort of Bitcoin-only conferences in West Africa. They now have a circular economy going there, and they're about to host the second year of the conference it's actually next week. I was supposed to go, but I'm going to the Afro Bitcoin Ghana one instead. But I made a video there last year. And one of the reasons why I wanted to make these videos is to show people that, yeah, there is this Bitcoin fixes this thing going on in poorer countries around the world, but there's also a lot of issues, and there's a huge amount of scamming, and there's a lot of problems with distinguishing between Bitcoin and crypto, and all those things that we are aware of and we see online. But basically, I wanted to also show the likes of the trolls, the Udis and the Dan Helds and those sort of people that, yeah, there's actually really meaningful Bitcoin work going on in the global south. And I know you won't believe it if I write it on Cointelegraph, but here you go. Here's some viral content of me, getting someone to pay, sending sats in front of Machu Picchu. Like, we were the first, Paco and I were the first ever tourists to get our entire trip paid for up Machu Picchu in Bitcoin. And now there have been other tourists that have followed us. I mean, that's obviously very much geared towards Westerners. Unfortunately, a lot of Peruvians have not been to Machu Picchu and probably never will go, as it's it's a lot poorer Peru than I thought it would be. And that's actually a bit of a shock for me. But, these little signs and I don't know, they're just encouraging, right? That a tour guide is like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll accept Bitcoin. I'm going to tell my friends about it. And before we knew it, he was like, not orange pilling, but he's just introducing Bitcoin to his pals. And we ended up going to like the hot springs actually with this guide in Machu Picchu. And it was me, Paco, 4 of these guides, and they were all like in their 50s, had like stories for days. We were just having a few beers there, and obviously it ended up being this gigantic sort of mind-blowing conversation about Bitcoin. And I was walking back to the place where I was staying with Paco. I was like, shit, I think we'd like genuinely orange pilled them. Like, often you talk about Bitcoin with someone and it's like a first step, but sometimes you genuinely orange pill someone. And it did feel more that way. But now I'm going to answer your question. Sorry, Walker.
I love the roundabout. I'm all about it.
Yeah, I'm very roundabout. I've not got the best analytical progressive way of answering these questions. So let's go to, you mentioned Cuba as a sort of first touch point. So I was surprised at how incredibly adept, smart, and resourceful the Cubans were. But now in hindsight, it makes total sense because you live in a country which has been, cut off from the West effectively and has been punished by like one of the worst economic systems ever imagined. And so, even I wrote an article for Bitcoin Magazine, which will be out in the next edition, where I go into a bit more detail. And I actually explain the moment when we got followed by the Cuban spies as I was trying to give out Bitcoin to people in a marketplace there. But I use an example of a fan that we found in Catria's house, which is, it has an American base, so it's like pre-1960s like base to the fan. The rotary blades are Russian, the power cord is Chinese, and obviously it's like twice my age. And and I was like, and it was like just blowing. It was like someone just going like on you in the corner. It was doing nothing, but that's the best fan they have, and it's the result of 60 years of toil and macroeconomic issues and wars and missile crises, all this sort of stuff, and that's the sort of level of Cuban resilience that you're working with there. They're able to repair like the crappiest little electric fan out of all these little bits and pieces, and they're running nodes in this way, and they are trying to promote self-custody solutions on Lightning, which obviously with Phoenix right now is actually quite tricky because Cubans earn just so much less than Americans. So there's a really hardcore niche of excellent Bitcoin educators, Forte, Catria, Vitalion, the guys actually that feature in the documentary, as well as some who are like not doxed at all and not public. And this is another point of why it's actually really hard to make Bitcoin content a lot of the time, because a lot of the stories you simply cannot share, or you simply cannot not shared that they're docs, but a lot of people just don't want to talk to you publicly about the fact that they've been in Bitcoin since 2010 because it could be an attack vector or whatever it may be. And so that's also something I learned quite early on when reporting on Bitcoin stuff. I was like, oh crap, there are so many amazing Bitcoin stories out there, but I can't talk about them. It's just the nature of it being such a revolutionary technology. Maybe these stories will come out in 50 years' time, but that was the story with some of the Cubans. I mean, I don't think Battalion will mind me sharing, but he works for the Cuban government, and he in 2014 he read the Bitcoin white paper before Cubans had the internet, because the government had the internet before regular Cubans did. Yeah, and he was like, "Holy shit! Like this is amazing." And so he started learning about Bitcoin back then. He's one of the earliest sort of Cuban Bitcoiners to get involved with it. And I was going to say, but he was also like, I work at the government. I understand that this could be like a destabilizing currency. It could be the thing that sparks that revolution. And that for me as well was like a real awakening of, holy crap, this is so much bigger than us. Like, what happens if we do topple one of the last communist states because of this decentralized technology? Wouldn't that be like the most amazing thing? But also, that's absolutely terrifying. Like we as Bitcoiners were part of that movement. We're seeing it in lots of other places around the world to some extent, like with El Salvador and the way in which that's spurring us economic progression. But these would be also sort of historic feats. I don't want to get like megalomaniacal. I mean, a lot of Bitcoiners are, right? But it really did hit home just how important having state-free money is. In the most overbearing state place. I don't know. Do you want to fly around the world a bit more?
I'd love to. I just wanted to touch on that for a second, because I think it's like it's so easy for us a lot of times to get caught up in some of the top-down narratives that come around about Bitcoin. Like right now, the ETF, which of course, when all these spot Bitcoin ETFs eventually get approved, that is a huge milestone, undoubtedly so. Not denying that whatsoever. But actually, BTC Sessions said something when he was on here with me that really stuck with me, that I thought was beautiful, because I was just asking him about top-down versus bottom-up adoption. And he said, Walker, if top-down was all that mattered, top-down would have already given us Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is bottom-up. And it was just such a brilliant thing, like, oh, very true. And he's like, it's, top-down pumps bags, but bottom-up changes the world. And I thought that was such a beautiful sentiment. And as easy as it is to get caught in the, the number go up narrative that is going to naturally come to be, I think it's so important to focus on these, what some people who shall remain nameless might call virtue signaling type stories. But I think these stories are so important because it starts with one story and it starts with one person or a small group of people. But that's how every bottom up movement necessarily starts. It has to start with one and then two and then spread out from there. It's the network effect of bottom up movements that has so much power to change the world, that has toppled dictators, that has, brought about revolutions. That's a beautiful thing, and it's something that people should really try to seek out stories about, I think. And I'm glad that you are out there telling those stories. So, and with that, let's go to another one. Let's go around the world a little bit. How else was the experience in Peru? How did you find it? I know there's is Motiv in, that's in Peru, right?
Yeah. So they are similar thing to Bitcoin Beach and El Zonte.
Mm-hmm.
But with Motiv, the project is incredibly ambitious. They wanted to try to see if these Bitcoin circular economies can be started in the most sort of extremely different terrains, and extreme terrains anyway. So there's a couple of projects in the jungle, in like the high Amazon, like in Iquitos it's called. It's like where like the best ayahuasca is. There's also one in the lower Amazon, a place called Juanguera. So we went there, and that's actually where a couple of Bitcoiners are. I don't know if I should say who they are or not, so I'm not going to say them.
Sure.
And and then there's like 4 or 5 in the outskirts of Lima. And I don't know if you've been to Lima before, or Peru in general.
I have not, no.
Okay, like Lima is like the most disgusting city. It is awful. Like, Peru is absolutely beautiful, stunning, but like Lima is famous for selling bird shit. To give you a sense of like why the city became this big trading hub, and it's always like grey there. Like it's like a beautiful coastline, and then the city there's always like grey clouds just sitting on top of it. I'm really sorry to Chikame for shitting on his favourite city if he's listening to this podcast at some point. I love you, brother. Thank you for having us. And then there's like 4 or 5 in the Andes, and then there's a couple more in like these sort of beachy areas of Peru. So if you compare that to El Zonte, which is just one beach region in El Salvador, this project is just insane. And the NGO called Motiv was trying to sort of stimulate, or not stimulate, but sort of end people's dependencies on bad things in their lives. So there was a lot of like drug use, or there was like domestic violence, or there was inability to hold down a job in a lot of these communities in small towns, let's say. And so they were trying to work out solutions to stop this. And the classic thing to do is come in with a bit of money and teach some people some skills. And this is what they're doing in sort of 2018, 2019, 2020. And then pandemic happened, things got really, really bad. And then they got connected with this Bitcoiner who was like, okay, how can we help? And would you be able to, like, if I give you a load of Bitcoin, would you be able to sort of work out if that's a useful tool? And of course, Motiv, the NGO, were like, what the fuck is Bitcoin? And there was a lot of like sort of understanding how it works, and there's a lot of testing different wallets to understand, okay, how can we even send these funds around, and how can we sort of build from there? And so I went there it was September, so a couple of months ago, so 2023. So by this point, they've been using Bitcoin, they've got a system in place, and it was really interesting to speak with the likes of Valley, who like wasn't necessarily a Bitcoiner a couple of years ago, and now is like Bitcoin evangelist extraordinaire. He's like, he will orange pill literally anyone. He'll orange pill your dog. He's seen how useful Bitcoin is in an NGO context, and how it's changing lives and stopping these dependencies, because suddenly women are able to take custody of their money, and it can't be stolen from them, and it can't be used against them, and men are able to earn some money, and it's not stolen from them on the way back from work, or they can't spend it all in the bar on the way home.
Right.
These are really, really underprivileged sort of towns, and all the sort of secondary and sort of tertiary consequences because of them using Bitcoin as a tool rather than cash as the tool in these sort of young towns has made Valley, who is also just like the most wonderful soul, just really believe that Bitcoin is this like fantastic tool. Valley works with Rich, who's American based in California, and he's ex-LAPD, also like went into business and stuff, and he's taken that experience as sort of managerial stuff to sort of work out how they can connect up this operation. And they're both Christians. It's similar to Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. There's a big sort of religious sort of element to what they're doing, but that chimes in well with Peruvian culture, because Peru is very, very Catholic. So the idea is that you can use this Bitcoin tool to not just earn money and spend and save, but also like learn a skill to then become more autonomous, more sovereign, basically. So a lot of what they do already chimed in with the Bitcoin ethos, and now they're doing it with Bitcoin on top. They're sort of learning these surprising things. And like, so when I was going there, by the 6th or 7th town we visited, I was asking people if they were paid actors. I was like, like there's no way that you're this adept. Like when you send Bitcoin to someone the first time, like over Lightning or whatever. There's like a little bit of stuttering, and you're like, oh, I scanned that, do I? And then the QR code didn't load correctly or whatever. It's not like mega seamless yet. And obviously, like devs know this, and we know that obviously in brighter countries, the QR codes don't work as well. In Lima, in a couple of the ones, it was in Caraballo, which I'm finishing a video on about at the moment. I was like scanning a QR code. They're like, oh no, come over here. I was like, what? They're like, oh no, we've got like a shadowy bit of the shop where we always scan in when it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, okay, that is like absolute like 100% sign that they're using Bitcoin literally every day, because they know that Lightning's limitations on crappy old phones at 2 o'clock sun is that you have to go into this shadowy corner of the shop to make the Lightning transaction. So those little
That's beautiful.
Sort of, yeah, like little bits of evidence like that. I was like, okay, these guys are seriously using Bitcoin every day. And yeah, of course, it's virtue signaling to say that people are using Bitcoin as a means of payment, and that doesn't drive adoption. But it's also the most amazing thing to speak to these women who, you asked them what they were doing a couple of years ago. They're like, I was sat at home. I was doing, naffle. I was waiting for my husband to come home and beat me. And now I'm learning how to sew. I'm learning this Bitcoin stuff. I'm selling you a T-shirt. I'm painting this mug, and with that, I'm selling it. Okay, this sounds like really like primitive stuff. And like, when I tell these stories, I always worry that I end up sounding like some stupid, condescending, like white savior walking in, being like, "Oh, look, we're going to like change your lives." But it genuinely is changing lives. And I really hope that the videos that I'm putting together really highlight that and show that, like, personally, I went on a real like emotional journey while I was there, because I arrived and I was a bit skeptical. I was a bit like, okay, what's going on here? Then you speak to the people and you're like, oh my fuck, like this is like one of the guys, I interviewed him, and his wife died during childbirth. He just started a business as a cobbler, like selling shoes for the NGO actually. Pandemic starts, he just loses his wife, and he's just like, I don't know what, that's not rock bottom, that's like, underground rock bottom. It was just awful story. And then he's explaining that, and then I started connecting with other people through this Bitcoin thing, started selling shoes for Bitcoin. The charity came through and like taking a big order from me in Bitcoin, and now I've realized I've got this sort of hope in my life. And then on top of that, he was accepting Bitcoin in like June 2020. So the Bitcoin is accepted and the money's put away. Has like gone up in value, because if you DCA with like regular orders, obviously you see that massive run up and the run down, but we know that over time that levels out to be like quite a nice tidy sum of saving. But I finished this interview, and I'm not at all giving the interview and his work credit right now, but I just started crying. I rang up Sophie. It was just like, I love you so much. Like, this is like awful stuff, and it was just, it's just incredible to see how Bitcoin is the tool that is touching these people's lives. It's not fiat money. It's not some credit card. It's not, they're not signing up to American Express and suddenly their problems are going away. It's Bitcoin. And I'm like, as good skeptics like we are, I'm trying to work out, okay, surely there's something else they could use. Maybe they could use a stable coin. Maybe they could use, Tether on Tron or whatever it might be. But I still end up arriving at that conclusion that for the likes of these NGOs, for charities, for anyone that's in the aid sector, like, why aren't you using Bitcoin? That's kind of like the ultimate conclusion that I'm arriving at through evaluating all this content and the documentary stuff. And then on top of that, it's, and why aren't you using Bitcoin? Because if it can touch their lives, it can touch your lives.
Well, I think that the NGO angle is such a really just common sense one, because if we think about just, there is so much money funneled through NGOs, and we know that oftentimes, this is not the case for every NGO, but for many, that money is misappropriated. A very small percentage makes it to the people it's actually supposed to go to, and it's ultimately, again, not for everyone, but for many of them, it's a very ineffective way of delivering aid and assistance and help to people, even if somebody's going in there with the best intentions, the fiat rails really make it easy to obfuscate where a lot of those funds may be going and to fudge some numbers. And the beauty of Bitcoin being this transparent ledger is it's like you can send, if you're donating money to this NGO, you can track where those sats are going. Throughout that whole process, you can see where it ends up. And, granted, if they're using some privacy preserving, mixing tools, which maybe the US wants to get rid of, maybe you could obfuscate that a little bit. But if an NGO wants to be fully transparent, Bitcoin gives them a way to do that in a very public manner that is just going to increase the trust in that organization as somebody who goes out and does good and does, good by its people that it's actually trying to help. And the fact that along the way you're introducing this concept of sound money and actually being able to save, because if you did this with fiat rails, and I've thought a lot and read a lot and heard a lot about the experiences with stable coins in various countries. And there are many, many places where people do want dollars and they want a dollar denominated stable coin. And that's great, because I think people should have the freedom to choose whatever money is best for them. I also think it's great that Motive is using Bitcoin specifically and giving people a way to save in the hardest form of money. Because ultimately, like, a US dollar stablecoin is going to be more, from day to day. Yes, we know that it's going to be, more stable, because the dollar is still the prettiest horse at the glue factory, right? It's still the world reserve currency for now.
I've not heard that before. That's amazing.
I stole that one from Greg Foss, I believe. He said it sounds much better coming from him in his, his Canadian accent. But I thought it was beautiful. Fossian. Yeah, because that's and it's so true. It's like, the dollar's the worst, except for all the rest. Like, it is still, as far as fiat goes, it's the best one out there. And for people who are looking to save from just the value of that purchasing power denominated in dollars from day to day, I get it. Use what you want. Use what works best for you. But for people who are trying to at least put a little bit aside to save up over a slightly longer time horizon, so that a couple of years down the road, or even a decade or more down the road, they're able to say, okay, wow, I have increased my purchasing power exponentially relative to whether I would have saved this in cash. I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of the stuff that Galoy is doing with stable sats is really interesting as well. And I don't understand, full disclosure, a lot of how that back end works with executing various swaps and all of that. But I think that that's a great thing to be able to try. But it's really nice to hear these stories. I'm looking forward to those videos as well, because I know for me, these are the videos that get me really excited about the future. When you see people who have been in really awful and hopeless positions be able to be lifted up out of those. And it's, it's made possible because of Bitcoin, but they're lifting themselves up out of it and people are helping them. It still comes down to people, right? Bitcoin just gives us this base layer of trust that maybe allows us to have a little bit more trust in the people that are trying to help us. And also happens to, as you said, Lightning certainly isn't perfect. There's plenty of issues there. If you want to do it in a self-custodial way, that is a little bit more difficult. Absolutely. And also your point about in Cuba, where the amount of money, I'm assuming you're referencing opening a channel, for example, is price prohibitive. So that's a difficult situation. But we're still getting better, right? The internet 15 years on was not perfect. And Bitcoin, when you're trying to, I think, redefine what good money is, also what a good monetary network is in a way that's never before been done, of course it's going to be a bit of a rocky road. But these people who are experimenting in these circular communities, I think that that's such a powerful part of this entire movement, because that's, again, those are proving grounds and testing grounds for does this actually work? And does it work at a small scale? And I know, at least for myself, and I think probably for you and for a lot of Bitcoiners I've talked to, the idea of getting back to a more of a decentralized localism movement is really attractive. That things should, you don't need to be in a 10 million population, 15-minute city. Like, that's not the future that people are looking for. You're looking for things that are more local, smaller, spread out, with more accountability in that local ecosystem. So I think that that's a beautiful thing. One thing I wanted to leapfrog over to a little bit, just about custodial versus non-custodial, is I know for you, for me as well, like when I was helping people set up, Lightning wallets in various places, oftentimes the easiest solution to show them was Wallet of Satoshi, which we have now seen is shutting down its U.S. operations. It is, unfortunately, the U.S. regulatory environment is not super friendly to people who may be deemed as money transmitters. I'm curious, just kind of what's your take on that as somebody who's obviously shown people a lot of different wallets, shown people of a lot of different skill levels and technological proficiencies, a lot of different wallets. And also, what's going to be, obviously this affects US people, but what is your kind of go-to for when you're, man on the street? Are you using Wallet of Satoshi? Are you using Phoenix? Are you using something else? What do you recommend for other people who want to go out there? Maybe it's friends, maybe it's family, maybe they want to take after Joe Nakamoto and do some man on the street too.
Oh, go for it.
What do you recommend for the, your ideal wallet? This is not a shill or anything. Just, I'm genuinely curious from your experience, what works best for you and for people that you're trying to teach.
Sure, and that was lovely. I could listen to you for days, mate. That was lovely.
Well, thank you.
Your preamble to that question was lovely. So, as you know, I'm no longer at all affiliated or sponsored by Wallet of Satoshi because I said there is a potential rug risk there. So we know it's not sponsored at all.
Yes.
But I do think that it is, it is a very, very good Lightning wallet, and they do tend to implement the features that eventually get copied by other Lightning wallets, which is quite good in a way that there is, it's not necessarily competition. I mean, I guess it is technically, but it's, people are pushing the envelope and trying to get that UX better and better, because ultimately we are competing with, double tap the side of your phone, Face ID and Apple Pay, and all those fiat-based solutions. That is ultimately the goal. We've got to get it faster, quicker, better than that. I know it's not all about payments, the payments narrative, but if Lightning is literally a layer 2 payment scaling solution. So what do I recommend? It really is like, it's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? The choice is yours. You can do whatever you want with it. Some people just sit on it and hodl it for 10 years and then they don't even spend it. They just take their private keys to their grave. But if I've got a camera rolling and I want the wow factor, then recently I've been doing Wallet of Satoshi or Blink, because weirdly, since the Wallet of Satoshi ban in the US, I've had some problems in showing people Wallet of Satoshi for the first time, and it just didn't appear on the App Store. Or yesterday or the day before yesterday, a Bulgarian fella, I went to zap him some sats from my ring, and he just it froze on the screen. And so when you have a couple of instances like that, you're like, okay, well that's it, I'm not going to use that wallet anymore. I do really like Blink, and I think Blink is a fantastic wallet. The UX is pretty great. The fact that you can create an address that's yours, personalized, you can send to that immediately. They also now have NFC, and I know where the co-founders live, so the rug risk is sort of mitigated.
And for everyone listening, if you're not familiar with Blink, it is the wallet that started out as the Bitcoin Beach wallet, built by Galoy Money. It's not available for U.S. folks either.
Oh, is it not?
It is
sorry.
not.
Okay.
It is not. This is sad. I know, but it's okay. We don't. The U.S. this is a multipolar world, right? The U.S. isn't the center anymore. But it's a fantastic wallet. I have somehow managed to get it.
Nice.
But if any regulatory agencies are listening to this, I'm just purely testing it, and I'm not quite sure how I got it. But it's a wonderful, wonderful wallet.
And I don't know CZ. Or CZ.
I certainly don't know. But have you been using Phoenix at all?
Yes.
Recently?
I use Phoenix personally day to day, and I recommend Phoenix to people that have the tiniest bit of crypto knowledge. like I say crypto because they might be someone that's like, I'll be standing on the street dressed as a Bitcoin. They'll be like, oh, you're a Bitcoin guy. I'll be like, oh, you recognize it. You must know something like, Bitcoin or crypto. And they're like, yeah, I've got MetaMask this. And I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. Let me show you. Yeah, let me show you like a non-custodial, easy-to-use solution. And we go from there. But bear in mind that a lot of the time, if there's a camera rolling, I'm doing it so that it works. And as we know, custodial Lightning solutions work every time. I mean, I've never had like a payment fail on a Blink or a wallet of Satoshi. For my own like choice, like I transact with Phoenix because I like the fact that it's non-custodial,
right.
And it has all those lovely benefits. But then if you're looking for other sort of nice custodial solutions, then Osmo Wallet is a great choice in Guatemala. I think their UX is fantastic. They've also got a learn section, which is also why I like introducing people to Bitcoin via Blink or Bitcoin Beach Wallet, because it has a learn. I don't know if you've seen it on the fourth tab. Is a learn section, and every lesson you do, you earn a Satoshi, but it goes up in sats. So the first lesson is 1 sat, then 2 sats, 4 sats, 8 sats, and so on, which is pretty cool. I don't know how high it goes because I've only done the first 3 lessons, and it's in lots of different languages too, and it's kind of become the wallet of choice for Bitcoin circular economies. But yeah, I mean, if I look at my Phoenix wallet, it is an absolute, like it's just a car crash of transactions. I mean, that's just today.
Yeah.
It's because I live on a Bitcoin standard. I have done for a while now, and that's my. That's
nice.
Yeah, this past week. So yeah, personally, I advocate for non-custodial solutions. But if I'm making content, then I want to do something reliable. But then for my friends, my family, or whatever, then I'll also recommend that I use Blink. But then sometimes I'll also whap out the Coin Corner wallet because it has an amazing animation.
That lightning the lightning bolt animation, another wallet that in the U.S. Our regulators are protecting us from. How kind of them!
Oh no,
I know it's to be an American, isn't it beautiful?
I mean, I can say the same thing about the UK at the moment, mate. It's equally dire straits.
Well, it's a shame, even I don't know if you saw the news with. UTXO posted about it with nodeless. Canadian regulators are like,
I saw
prosecuting
this
as a money transmitter. It always comes down to the money transmitter laws with when regulators are concerned, which I just find to be honestly just so fucking stupid, because you've got people that are working really hard to create solutions that work for people around the world. And yet you're deciding that in your country, people need to be protected from this actual innovation because they somehow don't, dot the right I's and cross the right T's and get the right licenses and, bend the knee to your pseudo-fascist state. It's just fucking stupid. And this is another reason why I think that the Global South has a wonderful opportunity to leapfrog ahead, because hopefully they won't have the same just idiotic attitude towards stifling creativity and building of real solutions for people, because honestly there just in a lot of cases aren't as many regulations in place that would protect against this. But you look at the US, Canada, the UK, these are places with just massive regulatory apparatuses, and so an army of bureaucrats who make it their mission to at least have something so that they look busy, right? Like you got to look busy, you got to have something that you're doing, got to, make sure that you're earning that paycheck and government pension paid for with taxpayer dollars. So thank you to all the regulators out there who insist on pushing innovation overseas. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
But therein, I bet that felt good to get off your chest, didn't it?
It did. I've got a lot more, but I'll keep it. I'll keep it in for now.
Okay, but just to that point of I mean, I know we're talking about regulation, but it sort of ties into the AML KYC stuff. I mean, Mike Peterson says it best a lot. The director of Bitcoin Beach. He's like, AML KYC laws are just the most awful sort of poisonous things, particularly for the Global South, because they ended up sort of looking at the Global South as like a cost, and it makes it so that they're too expensive to bank, and therefore they're going to stay unbanked forever. So for as long as we have AML KYC laws in place, we are going to continue with an unbanked Global South. And that's just completely ridiculous. And the only solution to this, well, that I know of, and I'm pretty mid, so I will admit, but it is an open source protocol, right? That has a very low barrier to entry. And yeah, maybe the path to really fully getting to grips with that open source protocol is through a custodial Lightning wallet released at first. But I think that it's another thing that maybe Bitcoiners don't quite understand. It's that going from a cash-based economy where you're hiding your money under your mattress every night, living with upwards of 80% inflation year on year, to a custodial Lightning wallet backed by the likes of Galloy, which is sort of I think run or owned or invested in by Bitfinex, which is obviously Tether, and Bitfinex is one of the most solid in terms of investments companies in the world. Like that leap from cash inflationary awful thing to yes, Lightning custodial wallet with life savings of say $30, $40, $100, that's incredibly substantial. And I think that's the point that a lot of Bitcoiners are missing. And what does that mean? That that you've got your money on your phone now, and that it's going slightly up in value over time. How do you think about your future differently? It effectively changes your time preference. So why can't Bitcoiners get behind that when all we want to do as a collective is to lower our time preference, right? Because we know that ultimately that pushes to this much more sort of meaningful, sustainable, longer, not sustainable in the wishy-washy ESG crap sense, but,
I've got
sustainable world.
Yeah, like real sustainability, not buzzword sustainability.
Yes, exactly.
No, I completely agree, because you see a lot of, anytime, for instance, if you're talking about Lightning wallets to recommend to people, and if you dare to recommend any sort of custodial solution, it's like, oh, it's essentially equated
straight to jail.
Yeah, with a shit coin. Basically, It's like, well, you may as well just be a shit coin, and it's like no one, at least I can speak for myself, and I assume you as well, and most of the people that I talk to that go out and actively try to educate in public, let's say. You're not telling people, here, this is the wallet you'll use for the rest of your life, and you should put your whole life savings on here.
Yeah.
You're saying,
it's
here.
It's not FTX. It's not
No, it's
FTX.
like, here, try this so that I can at least get my foot in the door of explaining to you how incredible this Bitcoin thing is. And I'm going to do it through this custodial Lightning solution. But you know what? If you start doing more research, you'll quickly realize that there are a lot better options if you want to save any significant amount of your wealth in this. And that means you can do it non-custodially. You can have it so that only you control it, and you can do that in such an easy way that it just requires you to know 12 or 24 words. And, granted, self-custody itself is not a walk in the park specifically for people who are just getting acquainted with this, but it's getting easier and it's getting better. And there's more and more educational resources to learn this stuff. So I think it's anytime you're showing somebody, here's Wallet of Satoshi, or, here's Blink, it's always with the caveat that, listen, this is great for like a little bit of spending money, but you don't want to put your whole life savings here. Once you're ready to do that, you want to put it in something that you can have complete control over. And that's on the first, that's layer one Bitcoin. That's the base of it all, right? And that is what gives you that true sovereignty. Like custodial solutions don't give you that sovereignty, but they do at least allow you to utilize this incredible technology on the layer two. Like that's what it's there for. It's not there to be a perfect solution for your long-term self-custody needs. No, it's there to be a great way to transact with Bitcoin. And I think that's missed a lot of times. I think Phoenix Wallet is fantastic. And I think it's great that you have a way to do self-custodial Lightning that's pretty easy for most people, right? Like, especially if you've already got a little bit of familiarity. But I'm also very grateful these custodial solutions exist.
Yeah, and it just Phoenix recently has got a lot of flack because it's like, the fees are crazy high, and I think it was Ben BTC Sessions. We're talking about him a lot, aren't we? He's he put out
his ears are burning right now.
Yeah, he put out a tweet like, if you receive enough inbound liquidity at some point, then your channels are fine. And this goes a bit above my, bear in mind I'm a journalist, pay grade. So I was like, I've never paid a fee of more than, I don't know, maybe 4,000 sats, let's say, for a Phoenix transaction. And sometimes I'm transacting in the range of 100, 200, 300 euros. Just on the way home today, I bought another Uber credit because Uber is on bit refill, and that's how I'm getting to and from the airport. And again, I looked at the fee and it was 3 pence, which is 4 cents or something.
Just
two
3
hops,
pence,
3 hops.
threepence.
Yeah. It was literally threepence.
Yes.
And,
I've always wanted to use threepence correctly. This is a big day for me.
mate, I don't actually know what threepence means. I'm gonna get on.
I might be wrong.
Right
It might be something else. Actually, now I'm not sure. Now you've got me second guessing myself. We'll just assume it's correct.
It's definitely 3 pence. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, we'll go with it.
Okay.
And it sounds so cool. But sorry, continue.
Well, no, but that was my point. It was only threepence, and I've definitely done something correct on my Phoenix journey to never have paid a very expensive fee. But also, I opened like the first channel on Phoenix when it was 10,000 sats, and like 10,000 sats for me does not break the bank. Yes, it does break the bank for a Cuban, and that is, of course, like really shit. We need to find solutions for that. I mean, I've actually got pinned another one of Ben's videos for tonight. He just released the Lightning Liquid how to swap in and out, like to presumably to help solve or help work towards solving this kind of problem. But it's like what you were saying earlier. You know, this is 15-year-old technology. The solutions we have right now are pretty great. They get a lot of us pretty excited, and the implications or the consequences of maybe adopting this Bitcoin standard are like who wouldn't want to try it? You know,
Right.
It's a really cool thing to work towards. So yeah, if we do have some issues with non-custodial and custodial Lightning, and that's just one layer 2. There's going to be lots of others, right? I don't know enough about any of the others. I've seen about.
Have you tried Liquid?
I've seen about 7 or 8 talks on Liquid this year. Even spoke to what's his name, Scott, that gave 2 of the talks. Who was like the head of, or like one of the guys high up at Liquid. Really nice guy. And I was like, but mate, I've just still not used Liquid. Like, when am I going to use it? Can you just sit me down and like talk me through how using it? So maybe I'll do it tonight with Ben's video.
It's on. You should check it out. And Ben is Sessions. Sessions. I hope you listen to this and just hear how much we're fawning over you in this recording. But it's such a great way to start out with literally learning anything new in Bitcoin. I'm very grateful for that service that he provides there because it's incredibly valuable. But Liquid, I hadn't used it until maybe a little over a year ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, and have used it relatively consistently since then, and it works really fucking well. Like, I haven't had any issues with it whatsoever, and I use a Blockstream Green
Aqua
wallet.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's, so I've got my once you write down your words and you boot up that wallet, it's you can spin up a Bitcoin wallet out of there on chain, or you can spin up a Liquid wallet. And honestly, Liquid's super fast, and it's a federated system. So you've got, I forget how many, they've got 12 different of their federation nodes, I believe. And so granted, you're putting a little bit of trust into that federation, right? But again, it's another solution for being able to transact cheaply and very quickly. And everything's a trade-off, right? Like, you can use, if you're ultimately just concerned about transferring large amounts of value and you're okay with having final settlement in about 60 minutes, which isn't that long at all by the traditional standard of things, for final settlement, it's actually quite fast. But if that's all you're worried about, then use on-chain. And if you are okay with giving up a little bit of potential, let's say, or accepting a little bit of trust in something else, then use a custodial or non-custodial or federated solution like Liquid or like Lightning or custodial Lightning. And you've got another great way to go about your use of this monetary technology. Because again, it's like the base layer works fantastic. This has been tried and tested for a while. It's going to get more and more expensive to use that base layer, as it should. And that's why I always think that the whole the Bitcoin security budget is not. It's a huge concern. Like, Bitcoin's not going to generate enough in fees that it's going to be able to sustain itself, and you're going to have to increase the total supply of Bitcoin. Like, a lot of the crypto side folks throw this out as some FUD, which I just think is patently absurd. Because if you see the trend of fees, like, it's going one way and it's going up. And I think what people miss about that is they're denominating the value in fees in the present day value of Bitcoin relative to other fiats and other assets, which is just very short-sighted. So that was a long-winded and roundabout way of me to say that Bitcoin doesn't care what version of it you use. and use what works best for you in any particular situation. And it's, again, as you said, you have options. Like, use what's going to work best. That's kind of the beauty of it.
Do you think it's also just a bit like men just being like annoying men sometimes? Like, oh, on the second beer, nice.
Oh, they're light beer. They're light. They're light beers, so it's okay, you know. But
Okay.
you were saying men being men.
Well, you know, it's like I'm sure this is a gif or a joke, or it's definitely a recurring thing in comedy. You know, like a man tinkering with his engine or something. Another man comes over and is like, "Oh, I see you got the swirly bop thing there." Yeah, and I used to have that one. Like, oh, I wouldn't do that if I was you. It's like, no, I'd rather use a swirly bop 3000 or whatever it may be. And we're all just like sort of like just being silly men about this, being like, oh, and you shouldn't use a Phoenix wallet for more than $1,000, and that should be on chain.
Swirly Bop 3000.
That's to speak of the devil, and she will appear.
Well, hello.
Hi, darling.
Do you
Nice
want-
to see you. Yeah.
You'll need it one of those.
I said
Well,
to
hello
send my
there.
love. Please say I'm not interrupting anything.
You're not. This is open form. This podcast is very, very inclusive, so it's okay. We were just talking about Swirly Bob 3000s. Joe was regaling us with his knowledge of car systems. You know, while you're here, do you want to introduce yourself for the folks that will eventually listen to this?
Hi, I'm Sophie Nakamoto, otherwise known as Joe's Swirly Bop 3000.
Not
I just
speaking
love-
of using my Swirly Bop 2000.
Yeah,
This is
I
the
just love
newer,
that you took
better
Joe's
model.
name. You know,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, fair.
oh man,
I was supposed to be delivering beers and a virtual one to you, so apologies, but I've got caught up in the... cheers. I've got
Cheers.
caught up in trying to master how to do reels in this day and age, because when I've been away with Joe, I've figured that actually this creative direction needs a little flair from me with the music behind it, so I've literally just been doing my homework for you.
Genuinely? You're the sweetest thing, thank you. But also,
Aw.
please don't do that. You don't need to do that. I have editors for this sort of thing. I have a full team of one person.
Darling, they're not me.
I love the dynamic here. It's really beautiful.
She's been honestly, she's been camera lady extraordinaire for the past couple of days, swirling my Bop 3000, and
Keep it PG.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, there could be children listening to
Gonna
this.
have to edit that one out. I think that was that was the one line when you're talking about Swirly Bob 3000s that it's like, oh boy, that's gonna get me kicked off of all the platforms.
Can you tell that we are a little bit overworked, exhausted, and travelled out? Is that?
I mean, you know, for good reason, I would say. Like, but that's a beautiful thing, right? And I think that there's sometimes nothing more satisfying than being completely bone tired, because it's like, wow, okay, I did a lot to get here. Like, I'm fucking exhausted, and that means that there was some hard work involved, and especially when you're traveling and like, I don't know how. Like, you really are a natural out there with it, Joe, because not everybody can just like, I'm just saying, like, I have seen you drop into so many of these man in the street things, and you've been greeted with probably every possible range of human emotions in terms of what people say or don't say to you. So I want to say thank you for your service there, because it is not an easy thing to just go out and talk about this, you know, fucking random new monetary whoozy wuddy swirly bob 3000 technology that is daunting and confusing and seems like it's too good to be true, especially when you're just out there giving people, you're like, hey, listen, I'm just trying to give you money. Like, I'm amazed how many people say no to you. Like, I've seen where they're like, no, I don't want the you know, the £5 or the $5 or whatever. Like, that blows my mind. I guess does that just speak to people being generally wary of scams? Like,
I think it's a real thing of human psychology as well, isn't it? You've got to be a real chameleon to kind of try and, it's almost like, we're the marketing / sales team for this in a way, but it's always that kind of que pasa, like there's a narrowing of the eyes, and you have to kind of adapt to that situation or that person's body language, or like what their pressure point or whatever it is that you can kind of sense from them in that moment to think, okay, what angle is the best way that I can capture their attention within 5 seconds? Because otherwise you've lost them. It's like the real life video stuff, isn't it? You know, if you've lost them within that few seconds, then that's it. They've walked away already, and you can't pull them back physically because that's frowned upon. We found that out the hard way.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah, you're not allowed to restrain somebody. I have heard that. But I think that that's such an important point, too, about when it comes to, because Joe, you were talking about, Bitcoiners always wanting to say, well, you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. When you're on the ground, and I have not done nearly as much Bitcoin education and orange pilling on the ground as you have. I dare say the 99.9% of Bitcoiners have not. But what I have learned is that, as you said, Sophie, if you don't hook somebody and get them to at least be curious in the first few seconds, and then once you start showing them how it works, if it's not seamless, you've already lost them. And so that's where those custodial solutions, which you can rely on, and then follow that up with more education, those are really powerful, because you need to be able to say, look, what I'm showing you works, and it just worked for you right here. When you hit snags and you run into all sorts of bumps in the first couple of seconds of showing something, you've lost them, and then they're just okay, well, whatever this Bitcoin thing is, clearly it doesn't work because I just saw it fail. And then they attribute that's stuck in their head about Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin doesn't work. And so it's a fine line to walk,
Good point, yeah.
I mean, you suggested something quite smart this week. We did it over the weekend, and it was like, what's your opinion about Bitcoin, like, right now? And then Sophie's like, you should ask them what do they think about Bitcoin now that I've just sent them some sats, like, instantly, like, via my ring or whatever. And, like, three of them, I think, were like, it's actually really cool, isn't it? Like, it works really well, and it's, like, fast and stuff. And, like, what else can I do with it? And you're like, yes, I've piqued your curiosity. You're going to, like, hopefully go home and, like, look into this a bit more. So having that contrast as well proves, hopefully, that being a twat on the street is more than just silly content, but it's actually maybe creating, Bitcoiners. I mean, I've got people that reached out to me on my YouTube channel and were like, hey, mate, I'm the guy in minute 3. How do I do this? And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm going to say his name again. I'm like, go subscribe to Ben's channel.
It's true, though.
7 times.
Yeah, we've been talking about this. This is basically an episode just about BTC sessions.
Yeah.
Well, there's no toxic masculinity here. All I can hear is lovely compliments throughout the circle. And
it's Maxilinity.
Yeah. I think we need to rebrand toxic maximalism as toxic Maxilinity. I think it's got a better ring to it, Yeah.
Well, I'll leave you guys to it because I don't want to infringe on the conversation anymore. But I will be listening in solidarity.
Solidarity, thanks. Were you going to get me a beer, though?
Calm yourself.
Calm yourself.
Walcott, lovely to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Ciao.
Ciao.
And she's gone.
Lovely as always.
Yeah, I know, too charming.
Really, though. So I am curious, what's kind of the, from these Man in the Street interviews and talking about hooking people in those first few seconds, what's the biggest thing you run up against? Like when you are trying to get you, and for anybody who hasn't seen Joe's videos, he literally goes around saying, would you like to get $5 or £5? And he sends them Bitcoin if they agree to it. But what's the biggest roadblock you run into when you're having those conversations? Like, what stops people, or what's the reason they give most of the time if they don't take the money?
I mean, a lot of people just don't, will be like, I mean, I've got the most recent example of Bulgaria in my head, and there are a lot of people, I mean, it's Eastern Europe, right? There's a sort of lack of, amazing, she brought the beer. Cheers, Soph.
Hey.
Cheers, Walker.
Oh, cheers.
That was an enthusiastic cheers. So a lot of them will just like head down, they'll like acknowledge you, realise that you're like with a microphone and like Sophie's rolling with a camera, which I really want to make super obvious too, because it cannot be like hidden camera stuff,
right?
Because then you're just going to get into trouble. I mean, there aren't laws against that in the EU as far as I'm aware, but you don't want to. That's just like a quagmire. I just don't want to fall into. So some people just like acknowledge me, smile, and then fight back the smile because I look like a tit, you know, like I was wearing a Bedford bobbly hat, a big Bitcoin thing, a Botiv Plovdiv shirt with like Joe and 69 on the back, and I'm sort of like jumping around a bit, like being a bit silly. I mean, it's similar to what I worked for a charity as a student where we'd actually have to like try to get people to sign up to the charity. And so you're always trying to find ways to engage with people. And I sort of draw from that experience a little bit when I'm doing this. But oftentimes it's, I'm too busy or running late for something, which obviously I completely respect and understand. But sometimes you get the occasional person, like someone today like was like, Bitcoin, you bankrupted me, and like walked off. And I was like, you don't know how gold that comment is for this video. Like that is like the intro.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's pretty perfect. I am curious. So, I mean, I think there is a lot of hesitance from people where it's like you have one bad experience with Bitcoin, and maybe that was you had Bitcoin on an exchange that collapsed, or that was you bought Bitcoin at the top, you watched it go way down, you sold it at the bottom, and now you blame Bitcoin for you having less fiat than you did before.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people got scarred by it in those ways, or they just don't know what the Bitcoin thing is and they associate it with all those other things. And so those people I would love to, engage with and interact with, and the fact they've acknowledged me shows that there is the beginning of a connection there. And so it's like, oh, you bankrupted me. Well, let me reverse that right now. Let me send you a $5. But then a few of them. What were some of the good people that accepted just recently? I mean, it depends where you are in the world as well. If you're in a Latino country, it is just generally easier to speak to strangers. I've only done this in like Latin America, Europe, UK. That's. I didn't. Well, when I tried to do it in Cuba, it just did not go well at all. Like the police sort of got involved and. I was like, oh crap! So I had to be a bit creative in the ways in which I went about it. But what's the most common rejection? The most common rejection is just no, walk off, head down. I don't want to be seen on camera, and then obviously running late, and then the common critiques about Bitcoin are it was very similar to the ones that Fidelity released in that report 2 weeks ago. The one that was misconceptions about Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Just went through them all. And it's ones you can expect, like environment, volatility, being hacked, or someone controls it, regulation, disinterest, all those sort of things that we're familiar with. And I can easily debunk those now on the street quite quickly with someone, and it's always kind of good revision to do that.
Right. Practice makes perfect, right?
Yeah, and it's an excuse to talk about your passion with brand new people, which is also what a lot of us do want to do. We do, as humans, we do just naturally open up more when we're asked about our passions, as opposed to our work or our, something that we're unless you are really passionate about your work, in which case all power to you. But you know what I mean? If someone does generally give you a really open-ended question and they seem curious and you're talking about Bitcoin, you do tend to get a bit excited, don't you? You're like, oh my God, this is going to be a great orange pill. Let's go.
I've been waiting for this. Finally.
Yeah.
No, it's amazing. I really do appreciate the work that you do, Joe, because showing those videos, showing especially, I think, some of the conversations that maybe don't go as planned, or of people throwing out the very common, very kind of things that a lot of us Bitcoiners think, well, why isn't this particular bit of FUD put to bed? Everyone should know this now. And it's the reality is that the vast majority of the world still has no fucking idea what Bitcoin is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very small percentage of people that have a handle on Bitcoin. And I think even those that have a handle on it are constantly realizing, wow, there's more to this and to its potential than I even at first realized. So I think those videos are also a great reminder that we need to have patience with people, and that the job of educating is never done, because there is always, unless we're fast forwarding a couple hundred years in the future, you're not going to have every single person on this planet understand Bitcoin as well as your random toxic maximalist on Twitter. And so it's those videos are a great reminder of that look, the average person is just going about their day. Maybe they're starting to feel the pain of, if they're in a Western country, of inflation and of the cost of living. And they're starting to maybe get a little bit more curious about money, and what the fuck is money, and how does this work, and why is everything so fucking expensive? And I think that transition, I mean, we can thank the central bankers and the governments for really starting to softball up the Bitcoin adoption, because if you start asking about why is everything getting more expensive, you start then thinking about, okay, well, how does this system actually work? And once you start digging into that, your eyes start to open, and then you're like, oh, fuck, this is a rigged system. How is anyone supposed to get ahead? And then you start to look for, well, okay, the system's broken. What can I do to at least help myself? And from that point of self-interest, maybe you find Bitcoin. And so I think I'm hopeful and also grateful to the central bankers for completely just mismanaging this entire monetary world that we live in, because they're going to mint a lot of new Bitcoiners. So I'm glad of that. One thing, because Joe, I want to be conscious of your time here. One thing I wanted to just kind of end on would be, do you have any advice for folks that are maybe struggling to talk to their friends and family, and like they're not trying to go out and do man on the street. They just are maybe having difficulty convincing their friends and family about Bitcoin, and they're really passionate about it. Do you have any advice, having done now, I mean, probably thousands of these conversations, I would assume, on the street with random people? Do you have advice for...
Jesus.
Yeah, quite a lot. Do you have any advice for people who are looking to try a different approach when it comes to talking to their family, who just don't seem to get it no matter how much they talk to them about it?
I don't know if I'm a good person to give advice on this. I mean, like, personally, I've just created separate WhatsApp groups for, like, there'll be like a friend, like, so that there's a university friendship WhatsApp group, and one of the guys just literally loathes Bitcoin, won't talk about it, doesn't like it. So we've just got a separate one where everyone's face in the picture is the same picture, emojis of Bitcoins, but the one friend that doesn't like Bitcoin has a aubergine emoji on his face. It's just because, like, well,
that's one tactic.
Yeah. And then, yeah, I guess ultimately you've got to respect people and respect their values and where they're coming from. And if someone has said no, then, like, two or three no's does not make a yes. I want to talk about Bitcoin now, please. It's that I think, yeah, maybe it's just a question of staying humble, right? The instructions are stay humble, then stack sats, not orange pill your pals, then stay humble and stack sats. I wouldn't want to force it or to upset anyone's good friendships, relationships, or whatever with their friends or family members or co-workers. But I would also say that it is really, really hard if you feel like you're alone on this orange pill journey. Like, I remember I was talking to Nathan Day recently, the BTC map and Nostr, and he's just like a brilliant mind who's doing all sorts of wonderful Bitcoin and Nostr related stuff. And he was saying that when he sort of first got orange pilled, he just like disappeared into his office for like hours and hours and hours on end, and then would like come out into the living room and just like exclaim to his wife and his son, like, it's all a scam, like all this fiat shit, and then we like go back into his office again and just like be like reading like the Bitcoin Standard and downloading podcasts and like looking at the white paper and just like really getting into the Bitcoin stuff. And he was effectively going on this orange pill journey by himself. Whereas it is really nice if you do have someone to bounce ideas off. So I guess a potential solution for that is to download something like the Orange Pill app. Full disclaimer, I am an advisor to this company. No, I do not get a commission if you sign up to the app, but it might be great in 5 years or 10 years' time when it becomes this amazing public unicorn company. Who knows? And
coming
yeah,
on my podcast and shilling, Joe.
Yeah.
Boy,
I do mean, you know what I mean? Like, it is a useful app to meet Bitcoin people, right? Because we can shout on Twitter and Nostr and try to sort of project our voices, and in doing that, it is actually quite therapeutic. I mean, I know that Julian from Kinetic Finance, he started his channel as a sort of means of therapy, and so maybe
great
that's
channel, by the way. Wonderful channel.
It's great, yeah.
No,
sorry,
I think
can't cancel me. I've shilled the product. I'm sorry.
You're all right. You're all right. No, but I think that is good advice. Sometimes, again, especially with friends and family, you need to wait for them to be curious enough to start saying, and usually it happens because the price is pumping again, and they're like, wait a minute, so are you still into that whole Bitcoin thing? And you're like, yes, it still exists. Like, But no,
And they've seen your transition from like sort of like 9 to 5 cubicle worker to like mustachioed, wearing hodl on his jumper, like Bitcoin tattoos, Bitcoin lifestyle, everything. And like, are you still into it? It's like, no. Like, no, it's getting bigger.
Whatever gave you that idea?
Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry, Walker, one really quick thing on that is actually really, really important. So the content I make, I try to make it so that it is shareable to normies, pre-coiners, crypto people, or whatever. And I always try to do it with my mum in mind, because my mum still doesn't understand, doesn't get this Bitcoin thing. And so I'm always trying to create content with sort of her idea of, like, will it make her laugh? Will she sort of relate to it, empathize with it, or whatever? Because in her mind, I've gone from like established like Bloomberg journalist to like idiot with a microphone doing street interviews talking about magic internet money that's probably a scam. So it's that's also my way of sort of coping with it, and also trying to work towards it, because I can share that with her, and it's not like pro-Bitcoin propaganda. It's not like a rabbit hole recap, like deep dive Bitcoin thing. It's like quite lighthearted, engaging travel content, I hope, with some Bitcoin in it as well.
I know. I think that's so important too, the idea of making content for people who are not already in Bitcoin, because there's a lot of content for Bitcoiners, and it's so important to have content that is accessible to people who are our moms or, our friends. And with that, where would you like to send people? I'll put your link tree and your YouTube channel and Twitter, Noster in the show notes. Is there anything else that people should look out for that you have coming up in terms of videos?
Send them to the moon. Send them to... thank you so much for having me on, mate. It's been really lovely to hang out, and it was nice to have a little interlude from Soph as well. Do send my love to Carla, and it's fucking fantastic that you're birthing Bitcoiners it's January, right?
Yeah, coming right up.
Yeah. Ooh, so it'll be a Capricorn.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've been speaking to a lot of Bulgarians about star signs recently, and they were all like, "Oh, you're such a Sagittarius." I was like, "How do you even know that?" Like,
they've read your dossier. That's how.
Yeah, because they're part of the CIA.
Who isn't?
But to send people, I am trying to make my YouTube channel more of these on-the-ground Bitcoin adoption stories. So the Botev Plovdiv story of my lovely mug will be there, and there will be a story about Ghana as I'm going there on Wednesday, and there'll be all the Peru stuff on there. As I know that I've sort of made a small niche name for myself as this man on the street guy, but I want to also show that, like, hey, I can do this kind of stuff as well. And I don't want to put myself in a box, because that is really fun and entertaining. But ultimately, I want to tell these really cool Bitcoin stories from around the world, and use the skills I have in doing that. So yeah, subscribe, whatever else.
I'll link it all, and to anyone out there listening, Joe Nakamoto can do it all. You heard it here first. Well,
Swirly Bop 3000. What was it again?
Swirly Bop 3000. Well, Joe, I really appreciate you sharing your time with me, because while Bitcoin is scarce, Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for coming on this one and hanging out. This has been a blast. I hope that now it's getting a bit late for you over there. So hope you can get some shut eye and get back out there. Good luck on your travels, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Walker. And yeah, that line is wonderful. It got a cheeky smile out of Peter last time, didn't it, as well?
It sure did. Yeah. That's how I know it's working.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, mate. Does it end there?
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net or hit me up on social media. On Noster, head to primal.net/Walker. And on Twitter, search for @WalkerAmerica or @TitcoinPodcast. You can also watch the video version of this show on X or on YouTube by going to youtube.com/@WalkerAmerica or Rumble by searching for @WalkerAmerica. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million. But Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.